his face, she closed her eyes, letting herself sink into the moment. Their embrace grew tighter, and in this union, the silent question of true love arose. Linell confessed that he wished she would open up to him sooner, as his feelings were about to reach a breaking point. In the golden glow of the flowers, their hands intertwined, and he felt as if he had already touched the pinnacle of happiness. Under the moonlight, a little girl was curled up on a huge bed, as if enveloped by the shadow of loneliness. Zelda woke up crying, her hand on her head, as desperate pain echoed through her thoughts. Suddenly, a dazzling golden light erupted before her, filling the room with magic and unease. The girl stared in surprise and fear at the fiery creature that had finally found her. The fiery creature called her name, Zelda, and everything around was illuminated by a mysterious glow. A voice emerged from the light, declaring that she was destined for greatness and that the countdown of fate had begun. Bright flames engulfed the girl, seeming to penetrate the depths of her soul. In a white void, two hands reached for each other, promising connection and support. She woke up in bed, struck by a strange feeling in the bright morning light. Zelda sat up, recalling the strange dream of being consumed by fire. She was surprised that despite such a dream, the room felt cool and fresh. Memories of her night with Linell flooded her mind. Her heart skipped a beat, and the girl smiled, her heart filled with tenderness and a strange premonition. Surrounded by flowers and light, the young knight removed the bandages from his head and wearily set down his longsword, as if he had just finished a long training session. He turned to his conversation partner with a concerned expression, his eyes filled with worry and focus. The older warrior pointed out that his moves today were extremely powerful. The knight was surprised by these changes, explaining that he had too much pent-up energy and was now trying to release it. A pensive look crossed his face as he contemplated the reason for his relentless training. The young knight seemed a bit awkward, admitting there was a specific reason he was pushing himself so hard. His companion joked that when you put in extra effort, some things become very interesting. He seemed to suddenly react, "Wait, are we talking about the Empress?" and then nervously gripped the hilt of his sword. The knights were just joking with each other, talking about amazing skills and bold guesses. One of them said the Empress was indeed extraordinary and wondered if his friend's eyesight had returned. He replied that it was just a feeling, because if his sight had truly returned, things would be different. Linell remained blindfolded, gripping his long sword, his determination unwavering even in the darkness. He removed his blindfold, a flicker of surprise and confusion in his eyes. His friend asked doubtfully, "Is your sight back? How on earth did you know about those things?" The lead warrior believed a new top-tier swordsman had appeared in the palace. He said he had recently sensed a powerful presence there, which was why he asked. A cautious footstep broke the tense silence, like an omen. Things had been different since the Emperor's wedding, which made him feel a little uneasy. The scene flashed back to the Empress walking with her companion. He wondered if a master swordsman had come with her. The hero thought that perhaps it was one of Duke Martin's people. Who was this master? He imagined the Empress holding a sword herself, as if she were the mysterious swordsman. They joked that the idea was too absurd. Impossible. Linell suddenly realized that the Empress and the swordsman were one and the same. The young man startled awake, his body jerking as if he had just fallen out of a dream. Amidst the brilliant sunshine and blooming sunflowers, the girl's smile filled the morning with lightness and joy. Bathed in light, a man sat thoughtfully at a table, his mind filled with important news. He was shocked to learn that the Empress herself had visited someone's chambers last night. The man covered his face with his hand, pondering Her Majesty the Empress's actions and thoughts. In the hall, a knight in armor anxiously asked if the Duke would report everything to Prince Tesla. Under a cold blue light, a map with the Queen's mark appeared, along with the question, "Has the Empress gone a bit too far?" The knight fastened his belt, commenting that the situation was unfolding in a way they had not anticipated at all. The man recalled seeing Ken last night, Prince Tesla's personal knight. He was holding a small box which, according to Ken, the prince had ordered to be sent to the Empress. The man examined the jewelry box in surprise, asking if the prince had any other instructions. Wait, the knight remembered something else. He looked a bit lost. A cloaked figure appeared in the dark hall, delivering a verbal message from the prince. A white-gloved hand carefully opened the mysterious box, which was filled with a magical glow. The man was sweating profusely, realizing the Empress would see through this gift in an instant. He desperately hoped everyone would abide by the agreed-upon rules. The armored knight stared at what was handed to him, utterly surprised and horrified. The cold-faced man wondered what was really going on between the Duke and the Empress. Prince Tesla was sending a very strong signal to the girl, like a threat that the Empress must not see. The knight clutched his head, trying to figure out what game Prince Tesla was playing. The man recalled that the prince hadn't said a word about yesterday, and their report had been flawless. So what was going on? His hand gripped the edge of the table tightly as he realized someone else besides them was watching the Empress. The knights worried that the prince might have sent extra people to watch her. The man confirmed this with a cold smile, explaining why the gift had arrived so quickly. One of them admitted that Prince Tesla was shrewder than he had thought and asked, "What's the next step?" A determined look appeared on his face as he thought about how they needed to turn the situation around. A voice in his head said that Prince Tesla was suspicious, so they had to play their parts well. He gripped his longsword, thinking that taking over a country was a much more realistic goal. Zelda, in a gorgeous gown, smiled as she greeted her guests, surrounded by lovely flowers. The ladies at the tea table thanked Her Majesty the Empress. The air was filled with respect and light. Catherine observed thoughtfully, wondering if Linell's absence was to be blamed on one of them. "Hey, Melanie, are you okay? How's your leg?" Even after everything, Melanie was still smiling. She looked so serene among the purple flowers. Wait, her eyes suddenly widened. She realized something. Impossible, this can't be real. Melanie blushed as she described the stunning and unique design that was all the rage back home. Catherine was surprised and a little worried. "Hey, Melanie, what's with that expression? Is there something wrong with how I look?" Her friend thought Melanie was being a bit mean. Melanie tried to hide her fluster with a smile. The two were trying to figure out if the dress was some kind of new fashion. What on earth was happening? Well, the atmosphere grew tense. One person said she asked because Melanie looked very different when she arrived. Another told her to shut up. Catherine said sarcastically that even the clothes reflected His Majesty the Emperor's personality. Melanie got angry, saying she chose the outfit entirely based on His Majesty the Emperor's preferences. The girl in the light-colored dress just watched them argue, thinking it was pointless, and secretly decided which side to take. She smiled and easily decided to support Melanie, saying the style was completely to His Majesty the Emperor's taste. Catherine, holding her cup, coldly pointed out that His Majesty the Emperor should see the outfit for himself. The topic shifted to last night. Melanie said in surprise that His Majesty the Emperor had indeed visited her chambers. Catherine, still holding her cup, sneered and called her a liar. Melanie became agitated but stuck to her story, saying she had a witness to prove it. Suddenly, a gloved hand pointed at the girl in the hat, and all eyes turned to her. Catherine, surprised and wary, turned to the witness for confirmation. The girl in the light-colored dress smiled slightly and explained that she and His Majesty the Emperor had gone to see Melanie together last night because her leg was injured. Melanie, extremely nervous, repeatedly confirmed if they had really come and left together, trying to figure out what had happened. Melanie explained that she was the one who asked them to leave together, as she was worried about the Empress being out alone in the dark. The Empress backed her up, adding that Melanie had practically begged them to escort her. Catherine said sadly that no one believed her, but admitted the other woman knew Melanie better. The Empress mused in surprise, thinking today's tea party was quite interesting and hoped everyone could always be like this. She noticed Pezzolini had been very quiet, though she seemed to be listening intently, and asked if she was always this quiet. Pezzolini, caught off guard, reacted to being addressed directly. The girl holding the teacup smiled slightly and admitted she just enjoyed listening to others talk. Someone set down a teacup, and the Empress looked up in surprise, waiting for the conversation to continue. The magnificent sight of the Shadowland kingdom unfolded before them, filled with light and peace. In a lavish room, a girl with pink hair sat on her bed, intently studying a letter. An illustration popped up. It was a portrait of Emperor Linell, making the girl gasp in surprise. She was stunned because she had expected an ugly monster, but instead saw a super handsome man. The pink-haired girl with sparkling earrings watched everything with bated breath, feeling a growing tension inside her. She was now holding another woman's portrait and a cruel thought crossed her mind. How could that woman still look so pathetic even in a gorgeous gown? Her hand tightened on the fabric as a mocking comment echoed in her mind. Even without the scar, she's still her, and with a face like that, she can't be the Empress. The girl in the blue dress suddenly let go of her skirt, and something sharp fell to the floor with a crisp sound, breaking the silence of the room. The woman's eyes were shrouded in shadow as a gloating thought emerged. Finally, Zelda Fontrova's true colors are about to be revealed. The pink-haired girl turned to Zelda with a cold smile and a steely gaze, ready for the final showdown. Someone was thinking they couldn't wait to see Emperor Linell's face when he was confronted with the heroine's true identity. And the man himself was watching it all from amidst a field of white flowers, a cold smile on his lips. "Take care of yourself," one of the girls said, bowing her head in farewell. The red-haired girl turned and called out her friend's name. Watching her leave, she looked exhausted. She remembered someone asking her about an interesting book she had found. The concubine smiled and said she had recently started a fascinating book and was completely captivated. Zelda asked curiously what book was keeping her friend up all night. The red-haired girl paused to think. The girl recalled learning healing magic from magic books since she was a child and guessed it was a book about magic. Zelda said she wanted to see the book her friend liked so much and suggested visiting, as the book was too heavy to carry. The red-haired girl was excited by the offer and promised to prepare everything for her visit. Suddenly, the appearance of a new character caught the blonde girl's attention. Duke Martin appeared before the girls, greeting them with extreme politeness. The concubines were surprised by his politeness, noticing the Duke was acting differently because Rosie was present. She asked the Duke why he was here, and he began to answer, looking a bit awkward. The Duke said he had brought a gift for Her Majesty the Empress, which greatly surprised the girl. The man clarified that the gift was from the royal family of Châtel and took it out from his inner pocket. He handed over the small box, explaining it was a gift from Prince Tesla. Zelda, sitting on her throne, accepted the gift and decided to examine it before continuing their conversation. She opened the box with a serious expression, wondering what important item the prince could have sent. Upon opening it, she noticed a strange energy emanating from within and thought, "What is this?" Zelda was very surprised, realizing she was looking at a box made with ice fire magic. Inside, she found a ring set with a pink diamond, which raised even more questions. Her gaze grew heavy as she realized the weight of her discovery. The Duke began to explain that the contents of the box were very important. He suggested finding out who it belonged to, saying it was no small matter. Just then, another girl asked why she was leaving so suddenly, and she apologized to her. Zelda clenched her fists sadly, saying she couldn't come back for a while and promised to explain everything later. She handed the ring to her friend, saying she no longer needed it. Her friends were stunned, unable to believe she was really being entrusted with such a precious pink diamond ring. Zelda explained it was a birthday gift from Prince Tesla 2 years ago and asked her to keep it for her, just in case. The girls held hands tightly. One of them silently wished the ring could stay there in her place. The blonde girl was left alone, her head bowed, hiding her emotions. Zelda's gaze was sharp as she raised her hand to demand answers, her voice filled with authority and worry. The person was completely stunned, realizing they were staring at Bonus's finger, unable to hide their shock. A staff was pressed against his throat as someone pleaded for Her Majesty the Empress to calm down. Zelda, cold and resolute, refused to calm down, her face a mask of fury and pain. The person said frantically that he knew nothing and had only passed on a box someone gave him. He wondered why Prince Tesla would do this and concluded it was a warning. Zelda began to worry. She realized the prince was starting to feel pressured, and she didn't know why. A flash of an intimate moment with someone crossed her mind, and she concluded that was what had spooked him. She began to doubt herself, wondering if Tesla knew everything. The person was still trying to explain, guessing she was being blamed for leaking information to the prince, which was why they sent the message. He admitted to receiving a report from his people about them spending the night together, but swore he hadn't spread rumors. Zelda, with sadness and understanding, realized the consequences of their actions. The person was terribly worried that someone had beaten him to telling the prince, and now he wasn't sure if the prince trusted him or had sent a spy. Zelda understood. There were other eyes and ears in the palace besides his. She imagined a traitor, someone who might be in her inner circle. She was terrified, worried the prince would decide to get rid of Bonus. A voice in her head said Bonus was safe for now, but the danger remained. A man with a cold smile appeared in a swirl of smoke, hinting that trouble was brewing. Zelda stood alone in the hall, head bowed, clenching her fists in despair. A sword lay on the floor nearby. She fell to her knees, realizing Bonus was in danger because of her mistake and mishandling. Tears streamed down her cheeks. Regret couldn't change anything now. She just wanted to know if Bonus was safe. She clenched her fist, deciding she couldn't just give up, no matter how hopeless it felt. A spark of determination flashed in her eyes. First, she needed to find the spy sent by Prince Tesla. She remembered that revenge required patience and prepared herself for a long fight. The man in armor breathed a sigh of relief, glad his intuition was correct, and observed the girl before him. Zelda turned cautiously, asking who was there and reminding them that using the training grounds without the commander's permission was forbidden. A weapon appeared in the stranger's hand, and the girl realized he was not one of her knights. In a lavish hall, nobles gathered around a round table to discuss the recently ended war and the upcoming Intercontinental Hunting Championship, wondering if the people deserved a rest. One of them pointed out that no matter how much they talked, the final decision rested with His Majesty the Emperor. Someone thought that after 10 years, the Wyverns had finally decided to cooperate, and after so many wars, it was time for peace and harmony. An ancient legend said that whoever controlled the Wyvern egg would rule the continent. Now there was a chance to unify the northern and southern continents. For years, they had been at odds, with wyverns soaring overhead, a constant reminder of old grudges. 10 years ago, before the war began, all nations had gathered for the Intercontinental Hunting Championship, where the fate of the world could have been changed. Mysterious figures met in the snow and fog, their goal to assess each other's strength. Linell, in formal attire, read a letter, thinking that although the war was over, the championship hadn't been held for 5 years. Then this invitation suddenly appeared. The Emperor of the Tabello Empire, lurking in the shadows, was certain the Wyverns would return. But his true intention was to probe his rival's weaknesses. A hand slammed the table as someone said that if this championship could prevent another war, there was nothing to discuss. The key was to observe the reactions of other nations. An advisor reported that the proposal had been accepted, and the Emperor of Tabello announced that the second prince, Calvinus Selman, would also participate. A woman in a gorgeous gown, surrounded by white roses, heard that important guests would soon arrive in the Raphaeon Empire. The emperor smiled, saying the empress would surely be pleased to hear news about the Shadowland Kingdom. A map showed the competition route, starting from the Raphaeon Empire and ending at the Pashat Empire on the southern continent. The emperor's expression turned serious. They had to be fully prepared for their esteemed guests. A white-gloved hand tightened around a pocket watch. As they waited for things to begin, time suddenly became critically important. The emperor announced a 10-minute break to give everyone some time to think. In the ornate hall, a man in full formal attire walked swiftly toward his companion, his steps firm and decisive. The young man with the cold gaze turned his attention to the newcomer, his face a mask of composure and inner strength. Surrounded by purple roses and intricate designs, Duke Kalios posed his question, his eyes filled with anxious anticipation. The Duke carefully brought up a sensitive point, mentioning that the harem had been neglected since the ceremony. The young man responded calmly to the comment, pondering fairness and peace within the palace walls. In a wild scene, he sarcastically asked if the Duke had ever received any affection from him, leaving the Duke completely bewildered. The young man challenged him with a deadpan expression, basically calling his ideas about fairness and benevolence utter nonsense. Duke Kalios stammered, trying to explain, but was hit with a question that left him completely speechless. The emperor, not wanting to talk further, told him he could leave, but the Duke wasn't ready to give up and try to argue. The Duke shouted that if all the benefits went only to the Empress, there would be trouble in the palace. His hand moved slowly toward his longsword. Elsewhere, an armored knight looked suspiciously at the blonde child, realizing he was not one of them. The girl with pink eyes struggled to remain calm, telling herself to keep her composure. In the dark hall, The girl hoped that as long as it was dark, no one would recognize her. She watched nervously as the man approached, worried she would be exposed if he got any closer. A voice in her head warned her that the man was blind, but she couldn't let her guard down as he was a master swordsman. The girl clutched her chest, feeling the tension inside her build. The man noticed her practicing her sword alone on the dark royal training grounds and prepared for a possible fight. She decided now was not the time to think about the voice. If the enemy pointed a sword at her, she would have to defend herself. The armored man thought that he couldn't let her discover his true identity, but he had already realized she was a foreigner. His gaze sharpened as he tried to figure out who was standing before him in the darkness. Zelda gripped the hilt of her sword, and a thought flashed through his mind. Could she be someone special? In an interesting twist, they both suddenly realized they were facing the Empress's guard knight, their faces filled with surprise. The man admitted he hadn't expected the Emperor to react so quickly, noting the strengthened guard out of concern. Zelda thanked him gratefully, breathing a sigh of relief, trying to hide her anxiety and not reveal her true identity. The head of the honorary knights, Macrame, introduced himself and asked for her name, and the girl froze, hesitating. She looked away, struggling for words. The room was filled with tense silence. The man with the scar smiled and called himself Bonus, a name everyone seemed to like. The girl looked at him in surprise, but the conversation was interrupted. A maid peeked in, looking anxious, asking if someone had shown up. Zelda said she had to go, saying Her Majesty the Empress had been looking for her, and the commander expressed his complete understanding. The girl blushed, turned, and said goodbye. Against the backdrop of night-blooming flowers, her eyes were filled with determination and a hint of worry. The maid, terrified, grabbed the girl's arm and said trouble was here, and the girl's face fell instantly. A man in a glittering formal suit received an urgent message that His Majesty the Emperor was already on his way to the bedchambers. In the darkness, someone on horseback galloped through the forest under the cover of night. The frantic maid burst into the room, yelling for her to hurry. The two girls rushed out of the room, talking about the Emperor's arrival and hurrying to hide. One of them was terrified, thinking everyone would find out about her secret training, and complained about having too many secrets. She explained that she hadn't expected the Emperor to return because he had a late-night meeting, but was grateful for the Chamberlain's warning. Zelda, who had just returned, only dreamed of taking a quick bath, but the maid insisted there was no time. The frantic maid urged the girl to the bedroom, feeling the pressure mount. Zelda shyly took the nightgown from the maid to get ready for bed, quickly jumped into bed, buried her face in the pillow, and pulled up the covers. The Emperor entered the room, his presence making the atmosphere tense. The nervous maid reported that the Empress was already asleep, explaining that she was feeling unwell. The Emperor decided to take care of his wife himself and dismissed the maid. The girl, holding her breath, pretended to be asleep. The Empress lay in bed, and the Emperor sat beside her, watching over her. He gently stroked her hair, noticing it was damp with sweat. He realized her fever hadn't broken. Clothes were scattered on the floor, and he was surprised she had gone to sleep wearing nothing, guessing it was because of the heat. The Emperor, feeling there was no other way, began to undress to lie down beside her. She, meanwhile, breathed a sigh of relief, thinking he was about to leave. Believing she was asleep, he moved very close, determined to cool her down with his own body. Their lips drew closer, and her mind was in turmoil. She didn't know what to do next. Their lips were almost touching, and she mentally commanded herself not to open her eyes, lest she expose herself. In a mix of embarrassment and desire, she admitted to herself that she could no longer suppress her feelings. The Emperor looked at her in surprise, trying to figure out when she had woken up. In a very awkward scene, they both stammered excuses, explaining why they were awake and the whole strange situation. He said he was trying to help her fever, and she, relieved, admitted she was already feeling much better. Zelda, feeling awkward, asked him to just lie down beside her so they could both be comfortable. The Emperor smiled and admitted that even though she was better, he himself was feeling a bit hot now. He moved closer to her, confessing that he had been craving her lips all day. Passion took over, and he gently pulled her closer, losing himself in a kiss. Zelda weakly chided him for taking advantage of a sick person, but her eyes betrayed her desire. She admitted to herself that she didn't want to stop, even though she felt both embarrassed and excited. Her eyes were filled with longing. He said he couldn't resist when she looked at him like that. The lovers held each other, lost in tenderness and adoration. They lay side by side under the covers, enjoying enjoying each other's warmth and closeness. Remembering some advice, he mentally reminded himself to restrain his feelings for His Majesty the Emperor. Zelda thought with relief that when they were alone, she could allow herself to be sincere. Linell anxiously asked if she could ask him for a favor. Pressed against his chest, she asked him not to be too affectionate when others were watching. He looked tenderly at his beloved, wondering if he should hide his feelings. Although Zelda was worried, she admitted her reasons sounded far-fetched, but shared her concerns anyway. A light and warm atmosphere grew between them. He agreed that sometimes he wanted to grant her requests. Even without a reason, he promised to hold back, but only for a little while, so as not to embarrass her. Hearing his words, she smiled, feeling relieved and joyful. Meanwhile, in another room, a girl sat by the bed near a lamp, engrossed in reading a story. The girl was flipping through an ancient book with a great dragon on its cover, trying to decipher the linguistic code of the ancient Pashia Empire. She was very annoyed with the mysterious egg, yelling at it to hatch quickly. Then, exhausted, she collapsed to the floor, touching the basket. Inside the basket was a huge black egg, twitching frantically, which scared her a little and also made her wonder what was happening. She doubted whether the egg had really been dormant for 300 years as her mother had said, eyeing it skeptically. She returned to her book, pondering the strange mark on the Empress's cheek. In the book was a picture of a man with a great dragon. The girl thought, wait, that thing that looks like a scar is actually important. Zelda, wearing a dark cloak, was lost in thought, wondering if she had messed something up. Back at the clinic, the egg started rolling all over the floor. This terrified her, and she frantically told it to be quiet so as not to wake the servants. The girl stared at the egg with a worried expression. She admitted she had no idea how the egg was connected to the Empress, but begged it to hold on a little longer. The time for departure was approaching, and someone was clutching a suitcase tightly, because the prince and princess were about to head to the Lappian Empire. Carriage servants were making sure the large luggage was loaded. The prince and princess appeared before the magnificent castle. They were greeted by a sea of roses. The prince's expression turned serious, and you could see the determination in his eyes. The princess looked a bit surprised and flustered, remembering that they had actually let her come along. The prince jokingly warned her not to cause trouble, but try to curry favor with the emperor. This made her angry. The prince confidently stepped into the carriage, thinking that staying silent and calm was half the battle won. The princess, somewhat annoyed, took her seat, thinking her beauty alone would be enough to attract attention. She remembered the most important thing was to make a strong impression on Emperor Linell. Someone had suggested she observe Zelda's actions. In the carriage, the prince and princess started arguing about whether she should imitate Zelda, because only a madman would fall for someone like her. The prince sneered, pointing out that the madman was exactly the person she needed to win over. The majestic palace of the Lappian Empire glistened in the sun, welcoming new guests. An elegant woman appeared in the luxurious hall, and everyone knew Her Majesty the Empress had arrived. The distinguished guests gathered around a long table. The atmosphere was filled with anticipation and tension. The Empress smiled slightly, noting that everyone had already arrived, and expressed her pleasure at not being late. The thought that a spy for Prince Tesla might be lurking among those present was unsettling. One of the men spoke to Zelda with a somewhat awkward smile. The Empress commented that everyone had arrived early to see her, while she appeared on time, maintaining her dignity. Zelda was surprised by the man's coldness, thinking that although they were told not to act too close, no one said he had to be so distant. The man watched with a smug smile, seeming to be a bit too into his role. An advisor suggested hearing the explanation first before discussing the situation, and it was agreed. A fearsome flying dragon soared through the sky. Due to the war with the beasts, the annual hunting competition had been put on hold. The southern continent proposed resuming the competition this year, and the Lappian Empire officially agreed, sending letters to all nations. The map showed the Lappian Empire as the starting point, and the entire route from start to finish would be under strict surveillance. The Empress watched everything excitedly, feeling a secret thrill, finding it all very interesting. She dreamed of participating in the hunt, but was a bit disheartened, remembering the ancient tradition that forbade women from taking part. One of the ladies excitedly mentioned the Pashia Empire, and the Empress was surprised by her enthusiasm. She wondered why this girl was so interested and happy about the hunt. Could it be she knew someone in the Pashia Empire? The Empress noted that this time was unusual. Not only the emperors but also the empresses of various nations wanted to visit the empire. The man confirmed that this wasn't the case before, but now everyone had suddenly decided to participate in the event. Zelda, in a gorgeous gown with flowers in her hair, looked aside with surprise and worry, her face filled with confusion. She quickly composed herself, trying to stay calm and continue the conversation, though she was panicking inside. Catherine discovered that the empresses and concubines from the southern continent would also be participating in the hunt. Hearing this news, her eyes narrowed. She jumped up, completely shocked, unable to believe what she had heard. Zelda observed her reaction, realizing her words had completely changed the atmosphere in the room. Against a magnificent backdrop, there was a woman on horseback with a sword. Apparently, southern women were different from northern women. They knew how to use weapons. A young man with red hair and glasses was considering whether to join, looking very interested. Two girls were worried, saying the new competition rules might be a way to belittle the northern continent. Catherine admitted with some embarrassment that she couldn't ride a horse, feeling like she was the only one happy about these changes. The background was darkness and sharp swords. Clearly, this competition was more than just a hunt. It was a battlefield for alliances, betrayals, and mutual surveillance. It made one wonder if the northern empresses could really participate. I mean, Queen Shad-Annie is getting on in years. They said Empress Eki was like a flower in a greenhouse, implying she was too delicate to handle the tough times ahead. Linell was surprised that the Empress said she wanted to participate in the hunt. The Empress calmly explained that she had been riding since she was a child and knew what she was doing. The man expressed his doubt, pointing out that riding was one thing, but hunting was another, and it was no joke. The Empress believed it would be a great shame for the nation if the northern empresses and concubines withdrew from the competition. Linell was worried something would happen to the Empress. He didn't want her to risk her life in front of those southern women. The Empress, firm in her conviction, prepared to explain why she couldn't back down. One of the purple-haired women calmly admitted that the other concubines were much better than her at entertaining. In a magnificent hall, the red-haired woman cautiously suggested that if the Empress's goal was simply to ease relations with the southern empresses, perhaps she didn't need to hunt a beast herself. Zelda, with a flower in her hair, smiled in agreement, saying she could learn the basics of archery before the competition, especially with His Majesty's help. The guy was sweating profusely, hoping his argument would be enough to change Linell's mind. You could see the tension all over his face. The Emperor tried to remain calm, telling the Empress her actions were too reckless, and clenched his fist. Her eyes widened, her face full of worry. The Emperor was clearly provoked. He told the Empress to come with him, reminding her not to raise her voice in front of the concubines to avoid embarrassing everyone. In the magnificent hall, a servant watched the drama unfold, terrified, and the two ladies at the table looked stressed and overwhelmed. Zelda, in a stunning gown, stared at the man with surprise and anxiety. He was clearly displeased. Suddenly, the man slapped her across the face. She flinched, shutting her eyes tightly. Her cheek burned red. He took a step closer, and a sudden, intense, almost intimate atmosphere arose between them. Linell leaned in for a kiss, and she blushed, completely flustered, unable to hide her inner feelings. It was just the two of them now, their faces close, the tension palpable. An embarrassed Zelda reminded him that there were people outside and that they had agreed to maintain decorum in public. Linell acted very calmly, just saying he did as she asked. The Emperor, with a sly smile, seemed amused by what was happening. He said he only showed affection when no one was looking, because that was what she wanted. The two ladies were horrified by the Empress's earlier behavior, worried about the consequences. Linell pointed out that all the commotion would stop people from being suspicious. Zelda nervously agreed. Zelda, looking radiant in her gorgeous gown, grew anxious as the man approached her, wondering what he was going to do. The Emperor, amidst a bed of roses, leaned in and told her with a sweet smile that he was here to collect a debt. He reminded her that she had been granted permission to join the competition, and now he wanted what he believed was his. He held her hand tightly. Zelda blushed deeply, trying to get Linell to wait until tonight. But he wouldn't have it. He said now was the perfect moment and looked at her with an intense, affectionate gaze. After that awkward moment, they returned to business. He concluded the meeting, while she remained unsettled. Rosie, the redhead, turned around, noticing something unsettling, and another girl walked away in the background. Zelda, in her beautiful gown, reacted with surprise and a hint of worry when someone called her name. Rosie looked anxious, admitting she had stayed behind because she was worried about the argument between the Empress and His Majesty. The Empress smiled and said there was nothing to worry about, that they had resolved the issue. The red-haired woman was relieved to hear it. Zelda, a bit awkwardly, invited the red-haired woman to her quarters, adding that she didn't have to come if she felt uncomfortable. The concubine gratefully accepted the invitation, her face lighting up with a sincere smile and a hint of shyness. Zelda beamed, offering to lead the way for her guest, looking forward to spending some quality time together. Suddenly, the girl's face was filled with fear and confusion as she faced an unexpected situation. In a luxurious room piled high with books, people were surprised and confused by the mess. Rosie laughed and explained that she had decided not to touch anything, as tidying up never seemed to make a difference. Zelda thought, seriously, how can you live in such a mess? But the red-haired woman insisted she had her own system. This strange, enormous thing just appeared on the floor, and Zelda was completely bewildered. The Empress watched it all happen, finding it both amusing and a little surprising. Out of nowhere, this huge, strange object appeared on the floor, right between the flowers and books, leaving everyone scratching their heads. Zelda cautiously picked up the mysterious object, guessing it might be an ostrich egg. She smiled and asked if the egg was for her, and Rosie, looking a bit flustered, said yes. They joked around, wondering if they should crack it open right there, but they were still unsure what it was. Rosie admitted she wasn't sure what kind of egg it was, because that's just what the person who gave it to her had said. Zelda gently touched the strange egg, noticing the shell felt different from an ostrich egg, and then it started to spark. The Empress thought, my God, that thing just moved, but her friend didn't see anything. The concubine, all smiles, swore the egg had really moved, as if something was trying to hatch inside. Rosie changed the subject, offering some lemon cake, which the blonde girl was all for, saying she was starving. Just then, the egg began to glow and crack, as if something wild was about to burst out. A small creature with wings and horns peeked out of the shell, winking playfully at its new owner. The little dragon popped right out of the shell, wondering why it had been stuck in that thing for 300 years. He was determined to ditch the shell, eager to get out and be free. The little dragon clumsily fell face first onto the floor, feeling the first sting of the real world. He looked around, peeking out from under a blanket, searching for his master with curiosity and a little worry. The little dragon peered from behind a door and finally spotted the person he was looking for, watching her happily. Zelda, with a sweet smile and rosy cheeks, holding a cup of tea, greeted her unusual pet. Linell, in his grand ceremonial robes, was lost in thought holding a letter, sensing that great changes were coming despite his doubts. Memories flooded back of the mercenary who had run away with Princess Licilia, leaving a trail of unanswered questions. It turned out that the mercenary was not just a deserter, but the third prince of the southern continent's most powerful empire, named Norton Asselman. As soon as the prince recovered, he sent a letter to the court announcing he would arrive soon. Linell smiled slightly, feeling that the prince was showing him a certain kind of trust. In the hall, they said Prince Tesla had actually sent Princess Licilia to the Lapian Palace to get Emperor Linell's attention before the competition began. The gray-eyed knight worried that Prince Norton and Princess Licilia would meet during the competition, recalling the prince's cold expression when her name was mentioned. The young nobleman sneered, certain that a conflict was inevitable, and decided to help them meet just for the drama. In an amusing segment, they discussed how this could ruin Tesla's plan to have the emperor enter a second marriage. The knight was tasked with monitoring Prince Tesla to find his spies, a mission he threw himself into. The nobleman turned as if to offer some important insight, contemplating his next move. Just then, Prince Norton emerged from the shadows beside the palace, and everyone held their breath waiting for him in the palace's dark garden. The girl carefully led her horse, hidden in a pine forest under the night sky. She smiled in relief, feeling the tension finally start to fade. Zelda figured Linell would be in meetings late into the night, so she bet she could sneak back from the training grounds without being seen. Upon entering the inner courtyard, she noticed some unfamiliar weapons and wondered what was going on. She guessed they were for the Hunters Tournament. She smiled, realizing she was on the list of participants too, glad to finally have a break from her duties. The Empress grabbed her sword, looking forward to facing her rivals in the hunt. Then she noticed someone approaching and realized their paths were crossing again. Zelda, sword in hand, turned and recognized the face, her eyes showing surprise and a hint of joy. Commander McCormick appeared before her, smiling warmly, confirming it was really him. The lights of the palace archways were on tonight, the glow reflecting on white gloves. Someone was asking about outdoor training. The pale girl with pink eyes and a somewhat nervous expression turned to the man, wondering why she was so excited before the Hunters tournament. The knight cheered her on in a comical way, reminding her that she must protect the Empress from those arrogant Southern girls. Under the night sky, the girl looked surprised as the knight talked about the Southern nations ruled by empresses. It was mentioned how powerful the Del Roy Empire was. An old map showed that the Empress and the Knights of Del Roy were famous for their courage. The question followed, what about the other empires? A man with long silver hair, surrounded by flowers and holding a shining light, as the story continued about how close the Tabello Empire's relationship was with the northern continent. The girl remembered that one of the princes was completely against the war between the continents, and she had heard about the dispute between the heirs of the Pashia Empire. The conversation made it clear that the second prince, Kelvin, was chosen as the heir, while the Empress's eldest son had withdrawn from the competition. Kelvin had to fight desperately to win the support of the ministers. Zelda, confused, asked the commander why he had suddenly started whispering. In the quiet of the night, a new figure appeared, and it sounded like the change in conversation had something to do with him. The commander laughed and asked why you all were still here. Prince Norton emerged from the flower bushes and walked through the archway. He wore a cloak and had a sly smile. The cloaked child bowed slightly and introduced himself as Norton Azelman from the Pashia Empire. Zelda broke into a cold sweat, wondering why this guy had arrived early when the other guests weren't due for another week. The knight introduced Bonus, who was accompanying Her Majesty the Empress, to Norton, who was very surprised. Norton stared at Knight Bonus with a strange look in his eyes. Zelda wondered, does this mysterious prince really know me? Things are definitely getting complicated. In a throne room with ornate chairs in the background, someone thought that things had become tricky, but not yet a crisis. Zelda lowered her head, her face full of worry and uncertainty, feeling the pressure build inside her. She thought, with Commander McCormick here, I can't reveal myself as the Empress. Then the knight told the prince it was getting late and suggested he return to his room to rest. After hesitating, she decided that if the prince was going to the palace, she would accompany him. The prince smiled slightly and said it would be his honor. Walking beside him, Zelda felt incredibly awkward. She knew she had to talk to him before they got back to the palace, so she gathered her courage to speak. Now walking through the forest at night with the prince, Zelda asked him about the upcoming Hunters tournament. He answered her with a slight, knowing smile. The prince admitted there was a particular beast he was very eager to hunt, a mysterious glint in his eye. Zelda noticed the sarcastic undertone in his words, and feeling the tension rise, tried to figure out his true intentions. She was caught off guard when the prince suddenly addressed her as Your Majesty, and a wave of anxiety washed over her. Shock flashed in her eyes as she realized the prince might know her true identity. Zelda clenched her fists, lost in speculation about when he had seen through her disguise, and asked him to repeat himself to make sure she had heard correctly. The prince admitted she might not know him, but he had seen her a few times in Chateau d'Un, and she looked away, flustered. Zelda was surprised he remembered her among all the people in the kingdom and tried to figure out why. In a flashback, the prince was in armor, blending in with the kingdom's mercenary knights. He had hidden his true identity, explaining that he had left his home, the Pashia Empire, due to a power struggle. He concealed his background, traveling as a mercenary knight, including to Chateau Noir. Zelda anxiously asked how he found out she had become the Empress, worry flickering in her eyes. She wondered why the prince would pretend to meet her for the first time if he already knew her. He looked at her with a knowing smile against the backdrop of the palace at night. The prince explained that he noticed Commander McCormick knew nothing about it and guessed she was hiding her identity, which made her blush. He confessed he'd had his suspicions, as she looked different now from how he remembered her in the kingdom. The prince said he understood her reasons, as he had also hidden his identity for a long time, and she smiled in relief. Zelda was surprised that before she even had a chance to speak, the prince smiled, guessing she wanted to ask him to play dumb in front of his majesty. He swore he would grant her wish, and under the starry sky, their hands brushed for a moment. The prince gently kissed her hand, promising that when they met tomorrow, everything would be as she wished. In a hall decorated with flowers, the order was given to greet the guest as if it were their first meeting. A man in full ceremonial robes and a girl in a light gown sat side by side on the throne, both looking composed yet tense. The girl named Zelda was a bit flustered, wanting to say something important before seeing Prince Norton. Linell commented with a serious expression that men from the southern continent were rude and arrogant, just as they seemed. A confused Zelda recalled meeting the prince in the dark, doubting if he was really as they described. In an amusing moment, the man assured her that compared to other men, she would find him to be an absolute catch. So the situation wasn't too bad. Zelda wasn't worried about the prince's looks, but about his promise to pretend they were strangers. Standing before the huge palace gates, she silently prayed that Prince Norton would keep his word. In the hall, a man in full ceremonial robes showed surprise and nervousness at it all. The guests knelt on one knee, wishing glory and prosperity to the Lappian Empire. The blonde girl smiled and greeted him and Her Majesty the Empress with respect, making it seem like a formal occasion. Zelda was glad that someone had actually kept their promise, a slight smile on her face. Linell, in his full ceremonial robes, looked stressed and suspicious, wondering who this guy really was. Norton, in a magnificent outfit, confirmed with surprise that yes, he was indeed the prince of the Pashia Empire. The two men were joking about how strange it was, like shouldn't someone look different? The guy with the cold eyes kept saying how rude and disrespectful people from the southern continent were. Zelda decided they had to change the subject immediately to ease the tension. The atmosphere between the three of them became awkward, and the girl started to doubt what she had just said. The prince looked a bit awkward and admitted he was flattered. The black-haired man's face turned red, and he blurted out the girl's name. A newcomer approached them, saying that Prince Norton needed to confirm his participation in the tournament. The prince, with an apologetic smile, said he couldn't attend the tea party and asked to be excused. The black-haired man, both surprised and worried, turned to the girl to figure out what she had just said. Zelda shrank back, saying her compliment was just a courtesy to a distinguished guest. The man grumbled that someone like him did need that kind of encouragement. She smiled, trying to hold back a laugh, her face slightly flushed. Linell blushed and admitted that it was true. Zelda laughed and admitted that's how he was in her eyes. A satisfied smile bloomed on the young man's face. He got a little flustered and started muttering to himself, and you could see his mood improve. Two people sat on the throne, and the girl smiled, asking if he only loved her for her looks. And the man gave a shy smile. Zelda, with her pink eyes, looked at him with tenderness and joy, telling him she knew he was an honorable man. The Empress lowered her head, silently asking for forgiveness for her lies and praying for the happiness of the one who trusted her. On an ornate bed, the two slept in an embrace. The man gently asked her how she felt, and she smiled shyly, snuggling closer. Zelda was surprised that, even when he said sweet things, he still sounded somewhat distant. She admitted it with a hint of sadness. She had been with an emotionally unavailable man. Zelda said with a sweet smile that she warmed his body every night, and he just looked at her with a serious and reserved expression. She remembered his hands were always warm, and how, because of him, she felt refreshed and serene. Surrounded by black roses and a crown, she felt a wave of anxiety. If the truth came out, how long could this last? The image of the pink-haired girl appeared in her mind, and the thought of Linell meeting Lucilia terrified her even more. News arrived that the party from the Shadownuff Kingdom had just reached the palace, making our girl feel all sorts of anxious and excited. Lucilia appeared in the hall with a mysterious smile, as if about to stir up some big trouble. The blonde girl in the gorgeous gown spoke of nothing but the eternal glory of Lappian, where the sun apparently always shines. A silver-haired man in grand ceremonial robes, on behalf of the Shadownuff Kingdom, formally welcomed the dignitaries from Lappian. The girl with long pink hair, a sweet smile, and surrounded by flowers, introduced herself as Lucilia Hale. Lucilia, with sparkling blue eyes, greeted him and Her Majesty the Empress of Lappian. In a vast hall, by a table laden with food, she appeared calm and composed. A man in uniform and a blonde woman were entertaining, saying it had been a long time. The silver-haired man offered a stiff smile. Someone was already thinking they had to talk to him in private, no matter what. The blonde girl was shocked and worried to hear her name. She was completely terrified. Cecily, all smiles, commented that the Empress was almost unrecognizable these days. A man in a splendid uniform curiously asked if they knew each other and how they had become friends with the Empress. The girl froze, trying to answer. The Empress repeated the word friend to herself, her expression melancholic and doubtful, and you could see the internal struggle on her face. In her memories, she admitted she came from a humble background and grew up around the royal children. Zelda was crying her eyes out, remembering how she used to genuinely dream of friendship and of being accepted. The Empress smiled and blushed, saying she had been running around the court since she was a child and felt like a real sister to the Empress. A glint of determination flashed in her eyes when she heard an unexpected question. Cecily could barely hide her irritation, wondering how this woman dared to speak like that. Princess Cecily smiled and served coffee to the guests, saying it had just been delivered. A cup of coffee with delicate vanilla foam was handed to the Empress, who was invited to try it. Princess Lucilia was tasting her coffee, saying the foam was especially on point today. She had a brilliant smile, completely lost in the magnificent vanilla flavor. The blonde girl's heart skipped a beat. You could see the flutter on her face. Someone is gently stirring coffee with a spoon. You can feel that things are about to take a turn. The young man in a full dress uniform is watching it all, clearly captivated by her unique coffee ritual. Lucilia is caught off guard and a bit flustered, her eyes wide. She gives a shy smile, explaining that she's fond of vanilla foam coffee. The man, being thoughtful, takes a sip. Lucilia, with a sweet smile, then passes the cup and tells him to drink slowly, creating a warm and considerate atmosphere. The man with the cold gaze slowly brings the cup to his lips. The atmosphere is very tense, and she blushes. When she mentions that the queen's eye color is the same as her hair, Zelda narrows her pink eyes, trying to decipher the true meaning behind the words. The man at the table seems relaxed, sipping his coffee, while the blonde girl laughs a little too hard, trying to hide her awkwardness. The man simply confirms the similarity without even glancing up from the cup. Lucilia twirls a strand of hair, lost in thought, thinking how unattainable the queen is, as if made of glass. The pink-haired girl smiles, letting him gently stroke her hair, surrounded by roses. Zelda remains suspicious, wondering what on earth is going on here. The ornate cup is slowly raised, and you can feel everyone holding their breath, waiting for what he'll say next. With just a light touch of their fingertips, an electric tension suddenly sparks between them. The dark-haired man looks directly at the blonde girl, admitting that he's content just to see the queen every day. Lucilia, a bit flustered, asks, "All right, what do you mean by that?" Linell raises his cup with a slight smile, musing that a single glance can touch the heart. The girl remains silent, biting her lip gently, unsure how to respond. She quickly pulls herself together and smiles back at his display of romance. Zelda watches all of this unfold, surprised by the unexpected turn of events. Because men usually fall in her trap, Lucilia is shocked that this twice-married man is completely ignoring her. The man stares intently at the queen, waiting for her answer to his question. Linell leans toward the girl with a gentle smile, and she blushes shyly under his gaze amidst the blooming roses. The girl lowers her eyes and carefully sips from the porcelain cup, trying to hide her nervousness. Linell watches her, surprised by her reaction. Zelda is suddenly distracted and turns her head at call, looking a bit surprised. In a comical moment, the man notices something on her lip, much to her embarrassment. Zelda, bright red, covers her mouth, realizing how embarrassing it is, and asks for a napkin to wipe it. Linell gently touches the girl's lips, and you can feel the tension between them rising. The pink-haired girl is stunned by what's happening, her eyes wide with surprise and embarrassment. The dark-haired man smiles, enjoying the moment, and comments on the taste. Zelda, mortified, covers her mouth with her hand, realizing the situation is getting weirder. The man with gray eyes has a chilling smile, followed by a snake, giving off an ominous feeling that one must always be on guard. The man in the ornate uniform calmly sips his tea, reflecting on how rare it is to take such action and apologizing for his abruptness. The gray-eyed man stares ahead, completely consumed by shock and worry, not expecting things to unfold this way. Lucilia and the man in the formal suit laugh, talking about how reserved the queen has been since childhood. Linell is relieved to hear the queen has always been this way, and the blonde girl smiles by his side. The man thanks them for letting him taste the vanilla foam, a happy smile on his face. Lucilia's gaze turns cold and deep, a sense of unease rising within her. The white carriage slowly pulls out of the mansion gates, its wheels creaking on the cobblestones. Lucilia yells in frustration, not understanding what drew the man's attention to someone else, furious at everything he's done. The silver-haired man asks in confusion how anyone could think of doing that. Lucilia comically wonders if someone drugged him, as she can't otherwise explain his strange behavior. Linell looks at her gently, making the girl feel confused and jealous. The man and woman, caught in an emotional entanglement, start to argue, trading sarcastic remarks, but the irritation doesn't fade. Lucilia demands they find a potion to change her eye color to hide her resemblance to someone, insisting her eyes must turn black so no one will recognize her. A tall man strides into the hall, interrupting the argument and demanding they stop the pointless chatter. The blond man in a splendid suit introduces himself with a slight smile, full of style and confidence. Lucilia hides behind her companion, suppressing her inner annoyance and embarrassment. Suddenly, she loses her balance, a look of fear and confusion on her face. The prince catches her steadily, preventing her from falling and showing his concern. She thanks him for saving her, and he smiles, replying that he couldn't just watch her fall. Lucilia stares at him, surprised to hear him mention his own recent fall from a high place. The young man with violet eyes casually says it was nothing serious, hiding his true feelings. In the luxurious bedroom, the two nestle together, their faces almost touching, the air filled with tenderness and intimacy. As Lucilia's face gently brushes against her lover's hand, she smiles, and blue flowers bloom around them as she whispers Lechi's name. Against a backdrop of shimmering flowers and the man's bare chest, a confession of love is made. The man's expression turns serious when he hears the question about being a prince of the Pasha Empire. Lucilia gives an awkward smile and makes excuses, looking away when asked if she ever had suspicions. In a well-lit hall, the man brings up their recent conversation about the worsening situation, and the girl answers flusteredly. When it's mentioned that the prince should know the truth, an awkward and wary Lucilia turns to leave. The young man in a formal suit, surrounded by blue roses, says goodbye with a cold, firm gaze. In the ornate hall, the door is slammed open, shattering the peace. The silver-haired man is stunned by the sudden truth, wondering how a mercenary knight could turn out to be a prince of the Pasha Empire. In the spacious hall, the man turns to the girl, surprised and incredulous that she didn't know his true identity. Lucilia, both apologetic and anxious, insists she would never have betrayed Norton if she had known the truth. The silver-haired man is recalling the bloody struggle for the throne of the Pasha Empire, and you can see the stress written all over his face. Lucilia sits leisurely on a sofa in the ornate room, questioning him about the uprising and the first prince's escape. She's clearly worried sick. Then, a figure in a green cloak appears against a purple patterned background, talking about escaping the south and hiding in the north. It smells like trouble. The silver-haired young man forces a smile, realizing that even after everything, the third prince is still a tough character to deal with. The fully armed warrior stands firm with a long sword, a dark banner behind him. Someone tried to eliminate him, but failed. The battle in the bright hall has only just begun. The man spins around, completely baffled by the request to meet with Norton. He has a look on his face. Lucilia, though terrified, is not one to sit back and do nothing. She's going to do things her way. A spark ignites in her eyes as she realizes she needs to rekindle Norton's feelings for her. She's plotting to melt the man's heart so he won't interfere with her plans. The silver-haired young man just sighs and puts a hand to his forehead in resignation. Lucilia begs him to calm down and not do anything foolish. You can hear the desperation in her voice. In her heart, she's certain that if she can just calm Norton down, he'll do anything for her because he loves her. She can't imagine any other ending than being with her beloved, and she smiles at him hopefully. The man in the ornate uniform wonders if anyone would allow a woman who eloped and had a child with someone to marry another, especially the Emperor. Lucilia turns into a chibi version of herself, puffing out her cheeks, and decides not to reveal everything. She chooses to keep her thoughts to herself for now. The man's gaze deepens as he hatches a plan to set someone up with Zelda. The silver-haired man waits for him to continue, looking a bit confused and also a little wary. Lucilia smiles slyly, deciding it's time to ruin the queen's reputation. The man with the cold expression thinks to himself that everything is going according to plan. Lucilia, standing in front of a mirror, still can't quite process what just happened. The man staring at his toes wonders if now is the time to tell her the truth and carefully asks Lucy a question. When asked what she would do if she couldn't win Linell's heart, Cecilia turns around, looking very wary. The man's face is like ice as he admits to himself that outcome won't work. She decides that if she can't become the Empress, she'll go to the Pasha Empire with Norton and become the crown princess. The girl dreams of a future where Norton's brother becomes emperor and she becomes the Grand Duchess, a blissful smile on her face. The silver-haired man wearily thinks that he'll become part of the royal family one way or another, since either Norton or his son could become emperor. Cecilia gently holds the baby, regretting that she didn't want to talk about the little one's accident. The girl, with worry and determination, demands that he give up on Norton, her face a mask of inner conflict. Tension erupts between Cecilia and her brother, and she exclaims, not understanding what he means. The man clutching the fabric admits that a miracle happened and someone survived, though he doesn't know why. Cecilia's eyes are filled with fear, worried that someone might want revenge on her. Her face is filled with terror and uncertainty. The girl is lost in thought. Is it better to marry a prince who wants you dead, or to become the Empress amidst flashing swords and rivers of blood? The order is given. Get rid of Norton and the child. No one can stand in the way, or they'll all be finished. The silver-haired man is determined to find out the truth, and you can see the worry etched on his face. We see a baby surrounded by flowers, and the question hangs in the air, is Ram still alive? Where on earth is he now? He reluctantly agrees to get close to Norton for information, but he doubts a baby could survive a fall like that. Lucilia, with her head down, quietly says she's fine, but you can hear the exhaustion in her voice. She scoffs, already imagining how angry Norton will be. The man in the ornate uniform just says casually that they can always have another child. What's important is that Norton stays alive. You can tell he's exhausted. Her terrible attitude and crazy antics are nothing new to him. As she walks away, he wonders, how can she love Norton so deeply, yet still desire Emperor Linell so much? Outside the palace, a peaceful, starry night falls, heralding change. Norton looks down pensively, feeling as if all of this is happening all over again. Just like their previous meetings in dimly lit rooms, their footsteps echo on the wooden floor. The air is thick with tense anticipation. A judgment that this whole thing is simply insane echoes in his mind. Lucilia reveals a mysterious smile. Meeting Norton's gaze, her eyes sparkle with joy and excitement. Norton's face is tense as he lets out a heavy breath in the semi-dark room. He turns away in annoyance, his movements sharp and filled with resentment. Lucilia watches, confused and surprised, not understanding what's happening. Norton freezes, realizing he had just been a bit too familiar. A spark flies between them, and the girl smiles, sensing things are about to get very interesting. Norton overhears the compliment, and, despite his surprise, can't hide his inner excitement. The young man turns around, his face a mask of confusion and anger. Behind him, a girl with pink hair and a calm expression appears. Lucilia, with a slight smile, brings up the past, hinting at her habit of running away. She asks about Rams with a worried expression, but the man she's talking to isn't sure she has the right to ask. When reminded that she didn't just run away but ordered them to be thrown off a cliff, Lucilia tries to explain, her voice trembling. In a dark forest, a cloaked man feels frustrated, remembering that he only found out today what his brother had done. He remembers being told everyone was safe, and his hand freezes among the flowers in the night. Lucilia stands among the flowers, regretting what she did back then and vowing to herself that she would never have abandoned her people if she had known what would happen. She cries that she left to keep the children safe and admits she is terribly sorry, recalling the sleepless nights spent crying her eyes out. The blond man, Norton, furrows his brow and clutches his head, trying to cope with the rush of emotions. The girl holds back her tears and lowers her gaze upon hearing she doesn't need to worry about Rams. She gently hugs the child tightly, feeling the soft cries tug at her heartstrings again. The pink-haired girl, both desperate and anxious, begs for an explanation as to why she returned. Norton hesitates, still angry, but a flicker of doubt crosses his eyes. Lucilia takes a step forward, admitting to herself that seeing Norton made her realize her feelings for him haven't faded. She confesses that she's missed him every night, and a tender moment flows between them. Their lips meet in a gentle kiss, the air filled with a long-lost intimacy. They embrace, frozen, unable to suppress their emotions. The girl softly asks him to say something important. She anxiously asks where their Rams is now, her eyes full of hope and love. Lucilia nestles against the man, who says with concern that Rams is near the palace. Norton, blushing and a bit shy, tells her not to worry. The girl feels relieved and happy, realizing everything is going as smoothly as she had hoped. She laughs happily, snuggling up to her man and asking for a hug right now. Meanwhile, by the wall of the grand building, someone is hesitantly asking if their posture is correct. In the courtyard at night, the girl with the bow admits she's never shot an arrow because her hands are shaking. The man is helping her get the hang of it. Linell gently adjusts the girl's hands, explaining that she needs to lower them a bit and draw the string first. Zelda smiles and blushes, agreeing to try again. The arrow strikes the target with a thud. In an amusing scene, it's a bullseye. The men cheer for the girl, saying it's her first time. She happily points out that she hit exactly where she was aiming. Linell says she did great for her first try and suggests she go again. Zelda gets into position, following her instructor's advice to improve her balance. Linell gently corrects her, telling her to keep her eyes on the target and not to look up. Memories flood back of the first time she held a bow at age 13. Linell calls her name, and she turns to him in surprise. He comments that she usually wears dresses, but she looks especially good in her riding clothes today. Zelda blushes when he talks about riding with her until they're both exhausted. In a comical moment, she awkwardly asks him why he's saying these things. He just calmly tells her to keep practicing. Linell leans in close, and their eyes meet. She freezes, feeling her heart race. Her eyes shimmer with tenderness and longing, silently pleading for his love. In the dim light of the room, their figures merge into a kiss, casting a warm shadow on the wall. Linell, unable to stop himself, pulls her closer, his voice trembling with emotion. Zelda is stunned by his honesty when he admits he can't control his feelings when he's near her. He apologizes in advance for his strong emotions and kisses her again, and she responds with a blissful smile. In the dim light, the man gently touches the girl's lips, her voice trembling with excitement. Suddenly the door is thrown open, and a knight indignantly accuses the Emperor of improper conduct. The couple, startled by the noise, turn around in a fluster, realizing they've been caught in the act. Zelda thinks in despair that she didn't want to be caught in this situation, especially by Commander Macron. The Emperor is annoyed, demanding to know why the knight burst in without knocking and wondering where the guards are. Zelda lowers her head, realizing her secret is out and Linell will surely find out everything. The knight in shining armor, with a look of anger and hurt, reprimands the Emperor for his inappropriate actions toward Her Majesty, the Queen. The girl is completely caught off guard, watching the whole farce unfold with some embarrassment. She doesn't even know how to react. Zelda's jaw drops in surprise, and she covers her mouth, thinking, wow. She just realized they've mistaken her for someone else. Linell's face is serious, completely confused by what he's hearing. He's starting to think the guy might be drunk. The knight angrily accuses him of being drunk, roaring and saying how sorry he feels for the queen. Linell chuckles, admitting he feels sorry for the queen too, but he just can't help himself. This makes the girl blush. The girl, bright red, is lost in thought, trying to figure out what to say now. The knight continues his tirade, saying the other has ill intentions, while Linell just smirks and admits he's a bit unhinged, calling himself a complete madman. The knight covers his face with his hands, freaking out about how the queen will react when she finds out the truth. Linell, with a slight smile and a blush, calmly says that the queen already knows what's happening. The knight panics, says he heard nothing, and hastily leaves, telling the others to return to the queen. Linell turns to meet the girl's gaze, who is staring at him in utter astonishment. A hand slowly reaches out, as if inviting him to take the next step. The man suggests they continue this conversation in her room and holds out his hand, which she, somewhat flustered, accepts. Zelda, with a gentle smile and flushed cheeks, is practically glowing against the backdrop of flowers, feeling like a queen. Rosie, worried, warns everyone to stay inside no matter what. She's laying down the law for the baby wyvern, saying it could be terrible news if anyone sees him. The baby wyvern is confused and asks if it's just because he's not human. Rosie clarifies that it's because he's a wyvern and reminds him of the war between the continent and the wyverns. She explains that a wyvern appearing at a tournament meant to represent peace and harmony would cause trouble. The baby wyvern just stares at her in confusion, while she frowns thoughtfully, holding a steamed bun. The wyvern, surrounded by light, looks valuable, but taking her with them could start a war. The wyvern sadly acknowledges the obvious, recalling the time the girl's mother hid her in the study. The girl with golden eyes says confidently that her mother, as a healing mage, would never use a wyvern for war. The girl hopes Her Majesty the Queen will accept the wyvern, but doesn't know how to bring it up. She's confused about how to explain to the Queen that she ended up bringing back a 300-year-old wyvern after a visit. The baby wyvern is thoughtful, realizing the only way to solve this is to decipher the book. The girl looks sadly at the egg among the pile of books, wishing she could learn its story from her mother. The Queen in the red cloak appears as the legendary Wyvern Master, able to control the creatures. The wyvern admits with relief that she was so scared just now, she almost hid back in her egg. The girl watches her in amazement. The wyvern, with a sly smile, realizes she can't appear in her true form. Rosie watches this happen, looking confused and a bit suspicious, trying to figure out what's going on. The girl gets ready to wash up, telling the wyvern to get under the bed and stay out of trouble. The little wyvern is thrilled, realizing that even a mighty wyvern can obey a human's command. The wyvern gets a cunning look, thinking it can find its master all by itself without any help. The happy wyvern dashes into the night, dreaming of getting a name from its future master. The wyvern knows it has to hide from people, or things will get messy. Realizing a wyvern suddenly appearing would cause total panic, they decide it needs to move around in a different form. The little wyvern's eyes light up, deciding the chosen method will work perfectly. It dashes out of the building, ready to seize this chance to meet its master. The girl spins around in surprise, feeling like something strange has happened. A sudden surge of magic washes over the girl, forcing her to shield her eyes from the bright light. The girl with crimson eyes finds she is transformed, inheriting someone else's power. It's a power that lets her borrow the bodies of others, whether human or animal. The girl with crimson eyes and a sly smile thinks about the wyvern's ability, glad that Rosie didn't notice anything. She heads out at night with a laundry basket, surprised to find herself somewhere other than Rosie's palace. In the dead of night, someone on a balcony admits they've been waiting a long time for this meeting. A mysterious voice promises to stay by their side all night. Then comes laughter and playful talk from behind a curtain. The silhouettes of two people are visible, caught in an unexpected moment of intimacy. The girl watches in surprise, wondering why people are so obsessed with each other's lips. Two people, surrounded by flowers and tenderness, are so close it's as if they're sharing the breath between their lips. The silver-haired man is looking around suspiciously. The two people by the window catch a glimpse of someone in a tree. They look utterly surprised. The man in the black shirt clutches his chest, wondering if it's a spy or some kind of assassin. He stares at the figure outside, thinking an assassin wouldn't be so casual. And that outfit looks familiar. Suddenly, it hits him. It's the maid in the tree. What on earth is she doing? The girl with red eyes and an eerie smile is staring straight ahead. She looks both dangerous and confident. The silver-haired man raises an eyebrow, completely baffled by the random question about taste. He's racking his brain, trying to remember if he finished everything and who ate more. He's completely lost, trying to figure out why his lips are moving, but no sound is coming out. Is he choking on something? The girl asks him what's wrong, and he just looks completely bewildered. The tree branch is empty, which raises the question, where on earth did she disappear to? He's stunned that the girl vanished into thin air, thinking it's simply impossible. The silver-haired man turns around, and you can see the worry and frustration on his face. A man with long red hair and formal attire walks in, addressing him respectfully. The man points to the window and says that just a minute ago, A maid with braided hair was sitting in that tree, spying on him. The servant is surprised, asking if a maid really climbed that high just to snoop around. On the grass by the tree is an overturned basket with some cloth spilled out, which looks a bit suspicious. The servant orders them to catch the brazen girl quickly and not let her get away. He's sure she won't dare return to the palace after this. The man guesses the maid probably ran toward the main palace. He wonders if it's worth dragging her back. He confidently promises to be right back and quickly walks out of the room. He hesitates about whether to get rid of the girl, but decides just sending her away will be enough. The man tells her not to make things more difficult and not to say anything she shouldn't, his expression turning serious. He gently pulls her closer, suggesting they pick up where they left off, and she shyly agrees. Suddenly, someone kicks the other person away, separating them. The girl smiles shyly, confessing her loyalty to the prince with a blush as he holds her tight. Even being the emperor's concubine doesn't seem that important to her now. Just then, another girl in a cloak walks into the garden. She tries to hide her face, pressing her hands to her cheeks, feeling the heat and embarrassment. Her breathing becomes shallow. She hasn't felt this hot since drinking that potion, and her cheeks are flushed red. She decides to bring her fever down before Lionel wakes up and walks into the night, full of worry. The girl, her cheeks flushed, turns around at an unexpected sound behind her. A white cat with bright eyes appears before her, staring at her intently. She picks up the cat, surprised by its sudden appearance. The girl holds the cat, both surprised and a little nervous, not understanding what's happening. The cat nestles comfortably against her chest, and a strange, warm feeling spreads through her. It was as if an unknown power had awakened within her, surging like a wildfire. Zelda, with her long golden hair, turned around warily, having heard a faint noise in the silent, late-night garden. Beneath this star-studded night sky, she noticed two figures approaching from different directions. She suspected they were guards, but soon realized one of them was definitely not a soldier. Zelda carefully emerged from her cover, clutching the white cat tightly, and watched as the situation unfolded. Suddenly, looking at the cat in her arms, a wave of tenderness washed over her, filling her heart with warmth. Zelda was completely caught off guard, never expecting to encounter such a cute little creature at a time like this. Meanwhile, deep in the shadows, several other people were trying to figure out what was happening in the Empress's palace so late at night. The two people in the garden were talking, but it was clear there was no real connection between them. The man and the maid went their separate ways, each with their own ulterior motives. In the darkness, the man's hand tightly gripped the hilt of a dagger engraved with a crest, the metal glinting with a cold, malevolent light. A few flashes of light streaked across the night sky, and a flock of birds flew out from the bushes in alarm, as if sensing that something terrible was about to happen. Zelda's red eyes widened in fear as she watched it all, her face etched with worry. Terrified, she realized the maid might have been killed, and she had no idea why. Zelda's eyes flew open as she realized danger was also approaching from behind. Panicked, she tried to figure out when this stranger had gotten so close. In an instant, a hand covered her mouth. It was a man in a black cloak, and she was trapped in his embrace. Deep in the dark forest, the cloaked man held the girl tightly, covering her mouth while she clutched the white cat in fear. After confirming their surroundings were safe, the man carefully removed his hand from the girl's face. Zelda looked at her savior with relief and surprise, still holding the cat tightly. The cloaked man with a faint smile was none other than Prince Norton, his identity suddenly revealed. A maid lay in a pool of blood, a knife discarded beside her. An unsettling question about what had happened hung in the air. Zelda, holding the cat, listened intently as the man speculated that the murder was done cleanly, leaving no traces to avoid suspicion. Under the starry sky, the girl firmly stated that she would keep the sword and was given permission. Prince Norton appeared in the garden with a serious expression, his presence a surprise. He explained that he had come here by chance after seeing a maid running. Zelda said she had been keeping an eye on Prince Tesseler's knight, who was the one chasing the maid. We see Lord Ken, Prince Tesseler's guard knight, holding a sword, his eyes as cold as ice. Why would the prince's bodyguard be chasing a concubine's maid? Prince Norton was completely baffled. Zelda's concern was palpable as she worried the maid might have seen something important. Rumor had it that Prince Tesseler had planted spies, and it was suspected that the maid had exposed his identity. The girl's face was a mask of irritation and exhaustion as she mentally chided everyone for being so clumsy. The young man asked nervously where they had seen the suspicious knight. While waiting for an answer in the dead of night, we see a giant willow tree in a remote corner of the palace as they rack their brains to recall what happened. Against a background of dark roses, the girl holds a mask, making one wonder if she is the spy. The girl suddenly realized she was in Fessaline Palace, the territory of the Astromarcasate, and so they whispered in the shadows about Prince Tesseler's knight killing the concubine's maid. It's suspicious, right? Zelda believed the maid's death wasn't due to an affair with the prince, but for another reason. Perhaps she was covering for a spy under the starlight. They speculated that if Prince Tesseler was secretly meeting a concubine, the maid might have been killed to silence her. The biggest question was, how did Prince Tesseler meet Emperor Raffian's concubine? A white cat watched it all. Then, with a rustle, a red-haired woman emerged from the bushes, saying she had a hunch. Zelda and the white cat immediately went on high alert. After recognizing a face in the dark, Norton stepped forward to shield his companion, glaring at the stranger. Rosie frantically introduced herself as another concubine, Rosie Adelia, and bowed. The man asked what she had heard, and Rosie swore she knew everything but promised to keep a secret. Rosie's gushing declaration of her loyalty to His Majesty caught them off guard. The girl holding the cat showed a smile, but the men were still confused about everything that had happened. When asked what she was doing in the gardens so late, Rosie smiled shyly. Zelda, holding the white cat, explained that she was looking for her little companion, which she had been secretly keeping in her room. She admitted she was worried about the consequences if someone saw her unusual cat. Rosie said she decided to look for her pet herself. That's why she was here. The girl stroked the cat's head, thinking it must have been hard for the little animal to be cooped up in the bedroom all the time. Surprisingly, the cat had hatched from an egg in the bedroom, which confused and amused everyone. Zelda, with her white hair, gave an awkward laugh, realizing her joke had fallen flat, and the cat in her arms looked rather annoyed. The concubine remembered they were supposed to talk about Prince Tesseler and Fassaline's meeting and began to explain. Against a background of gold coins, we learned that the Marquis of Astu is a giant in the business world. Childhood memories surfaced of when Fassaline often visited the Chatelaine royal family. The young man worried that if all this was true, it meant they had been close for a long time. Zelda, with her long golden hair, warned that if His Majesty woke up, things could get messy. Norton sadly realized he couldn't help the dead maid now and decided to observe the developments after the body was discovered. The girl smiled and petted the white cat, saying it was time for it to return to its owner. The cat resisted irritably. The girl laughed at its reaction, and against a backdrop of flowers, the cat was told to go home quietly, letting out a faint meow. In response, the girl asked the prince to escort Rosie, while in the background, the cat continued to protest in another girl's arms. The prince respectfully accepted the request, placing a hand on his chest. Zelda, with her long golden hair, carefully returned to her bedroom, lifting the covers and trying not to make a sound. She froze when she heard someone call her name, an awkward expression on her face. Zelda sat awkwardly on the bed, feeling a dull ache and surprised by the unexpected encounter. In the dim light, she met Linell, who took her hand and asked where she had been. Zelda snuggled up to him as he confessed to feeling a chill without her by his side. She noticed he was awake, and her heart began to race as he gently pulled her closer. Linell looked at her with warm eyes, admitting he felt warm again with her there. They embraced and laughed, enjoying the intimate moment, forgetting everything else. Zelda laughed, making no effort to hide her happiness and relief in that moment. It was silent outside the window, but the room was filled with trust and comfort. She looked at him tenderly, admitting to herself how much she wanted to be with him. Linell stared into the distance, lost in thought, wondering if he should grant someone's wish. The girl's gentle smile and sparkling eyes nearly lit up the room. The Emperor, just awakened, reached for her, promising a kiss. He looked at her, surprised and a little flustered, unable to believe what was happening. Zelda smiled mysteriously and confidently, her lips trembling slightly in anticipation. The early morning air was filled with tenderness as she gave him a kiss, soft light streaming through the window. At night, a starry sky blanketed the luxurious mansion, shrouding everything in silence. Rosie held the cat with trembling hands, unable to hide her anxiety. She glared at the pet, confused and annoyed, not understanding how it had slipped away. Just as she was distracted, the little dragon angrily scolded her, thinking she could have found his master faster. Rosie flew into a rage, accusing the little dragon of killing the innocent maid. Hearing this, she completely broke down. The little dragon, feeling both hurt and annoyed, called her a fool. The frustrated little dragon admitted it was his fault, bowing his head with a heavy sigh. The little dragon floated there in surprise, while the red-haired woman held the white cat, lost in thought. Rosie, both scared and relieved, held the cat tightly, her heart pounding. A book opened in a golden light. She had just discovered something significant while deciphering the manuscript. The little dragon explained that he had only noticed the special connection between her and the cat by chance, which had astonished him. She remembered losing track of the little dragon in her haste and having to chase the maid into the dark forest. The girl happily recalled the moment she realized the cat in His Majesty's arms was actually him. The concubine admitted with surprise that she found it hard to believe the little dragon's true form. The dragon acted superior, demanding that we use his name, or he would burn the red-haired woman. Rosie curiously asked if he finally had a name and what he called himself now. The little dragon remembered the first words his master said when they met, which became his name. Zelda turned around, her pink eyes filled with memories, recalling the question that started the little dragon's new life. The little dragon's eyes lit up as he happily announced his name was Tia. The girl was surprised by the name, but the little dragon excitedly confirmed it was what His Majesty called him. She sighed, agreeing that at this point, he could be called whatever he wanted. Rosie admitted she couldn't get rid of the dragon or the cat, especially since the Empress herself might drop by at any moment. On a starlit night, someone decided to leave the group to avoid any trouble. A young man in a green cloak emerged from the shadows, making a sudden appearance. The guy in the green cloak was still very grateful to her for protecting His Majesty that one time. The girl was a bit flustered, saying she was just doing her duty. Norton said his goodbyes, promising to catch up again if they had the chance. Rosie was a little down, wondering when she would see him again. In the dead of night, Prince Norton appeared. He greeted another person. The prince, with a serious expression, confirmed that everything was proceeding as they had anticipated. In a lavish hall, two men were discussing how the princess's actions were faster than they had expected, with one of them asking, "What about Rams?" The other man sneered that he had just mentioned Rams was approaching the palace, adding that it was a good thing they had moved him to a safe place. The first man thanked him for his help and promised to repay him. Their wine glasses clinked. Norton, looking thoughtful, started a new topic, mentioning he had something he wanted to bring up. The man holding the wine glass was caught off guard when asked about the scar on his face. The gray-eyed man in a magnificent uniform produced an emblem, saying it was a greeting from His Highness. The glass shattered. The story continued about a mercenary everyone thought was dead, but he had returned as a prince of the Pasha Empire, stunning everyone. The man with the scar wondered if there were any rumors about that day. Norton said, "You mean the day the princess ran away with a royal knight behind your back?" Letitia confessed she had only learned of her brother's actions today and swore she would never have left him if she had known what would happen. Tears streamed down her face as she explained she left for the sake of her child. She said she was sorry and remembered the countless sleepless nights they had spent crying in each other's arms. The girl and the man realized their feelings for each other, surrounded by flowers and tenderness. The pink-haired girl smiled, her eyes full of love and light. The blonde man with a wine-stained lip sneered, claiming the princess knew nothing about the whole affair. The hand holding the glass froze, and the air filled with suspicion and distrust. The man covered in scars stared at him in shock, unable to believe what he was hearing. Norton grew worried, suspecting his friend might be wavering. The man tightened his grip on the glass, deciding he had to restart this game. The man holding the wine believed that nothing would change unless Princess Lucilia herself pushed the prince into the abyss. A lingering feeling said, "You can't fully trust Prince Norton's desire for revenge." The soft scrape of slippers on a small rug heralded someone's arrival. Zelda, wrapped in a robe, studied herself in a mirror next to a bouquet of red roses. She was very surprised and leaned closer to the flowers, touching them gently as if trying to figure out their meaning. She sat on the bed holding the roses, bewildered, wondering why she had received them. Linell smiled warmly, remembering he had noticed the roses were in bloom during a recent walk in the garden. Zelda, with her long golden hair, held a lush bouquet of crimson roses. She wore a surprised expression, inhaling the flower's fragrance, remarking on its pleasant scent and enjoying the moment. Touching the petals, she wondered thoughtfully if this was what happiness truly felt like. Suddenly, her eyes widened in surprise as something unexpected happened. One of the roses in the bouquet abruptly turned white, leaving the girl bewildered. In a lavish room, Zelda sat at her vanity with the bouquet of roses when someone addressed her respectfully. She turned, anxiously bringing up an agreement they had made. Prince Tesla appeared at the door, his arrival causing surprise. In another room, a red-haired girl lay on a sofa with a book, a black cat sleeping in a basket nearby. She looked up from her book, surprised to see something familiar again. On the pages of the book, she saw a picture of a sword and wondered what it meant. Rosie thought the sword in these ancient texts about southern flying dragons might be related, even though it looked unremarkable. Melanie, carrying a basket, happily announced they were going on a picnic. Rosie was surprised by the sudden suggestion, but agreed because the weather was perfect. She explained she had wanted to have a picnic for the Emperor's arrival, but he never showed up. Her friends were surprised by the timing. Rosie mentioned the Emperor is supposed to be a handsome man, but in her opinion, no one could compare to their own ruler. Melanie, with a sly smile, pointed out that a handsome man had already arrived from another country. The two girls had grown closer due to their unexpected encounter, one flustered and surprised by the other's sudden appearance. The girls chatted sweetly, with one happily agreeing to lend her book for a nap. They headed towards the garden. One of the girls carried a picnic basket, while the other thoughtfully held a book. In a sunny park, lush with greenery and surrounded by flowers, they marveled at the fine weather and decided to find a spot to relax and eat. One of the girls was surprised at how quickly time had passed and noted it with a hint of sadness. The second girl agreed it had been a long journey and started looking for a good picnic spot by the water. Melanie turned in surprise, noticing something unusual. On the lawn by the lake, surrounded by snacks, sat the pink-haired princess, her presence commanding. The princess, with a slight sneer, commented that the concubines had decided to come for a picnic. She added with a laugh that it wasn't surprising, considering things hadn't progressed between them and the prince as expected. The two girls stood side by side, wary, holding their books and exchanging silent glances. One of the girls clutched her book tightly, looking lost and nervous, while the other turned her face away with a cold expression. Rosie turned away awkwardly, meeting the eyes of a surprised maid against a background of green trees. Melanie smiled and invited her to join their picnic, taking a bite of a sandwich. Enjoying the moment, Lanisha was filled with anger and concern, finding the whole situation bizarre. Melanie, still chewing, turned to someone with a serious expression. The Princess of Chatillon, with a brilliant smile and a haughty demeanor, was furious that a concubine would dare to ignore her. The princess stared in shock at the black-haired woman who was calmly eating a sandwich and introduced herself as a concubine of Emperor Raphael. The princess repeated the word concubine to herself in disbelief. Utterly enraged and annoyed, the princess thought that Raphael's empress had failed to establish rules, while the concubine continued to eat as if nothing was wrong. The princess couldn't hide her surprise and let out a cry of astonishment. The black-haired girl sternly corrected the princess, reminding her to say Her Majesty and not just Raphael's empress. The princess was utterly infuriated, glaring at him and telling him to cut the crap. She clenched her fists, not hiding her annoyance, and accused him of being so bold. Her eyes widened in surprise as things took a sudden turn. A young lad appeared out of nowhere and caught her, and she stared at him, stunned. The guy set the rules on how to treat people, while the maid just watched, completely bewildered. Rosie recognized her rescuer as Prince Norton, and she was completely stunned. The concubine holding the book said awkwardly that someone someone's behavior was different from this morning. She blushed and covered her face, surprised at how shy she was being. Meanwhile, a black-haired girl stood by with a serious expression. The flustered girl realized they were talking about her and asked in confusion, "Wait, what are you talking about?" Suddenly, a young man appeared before her, and they stared at each other, completely embarrassed. The girl was held by her friend, and in the background, the pink-haired maid just stared in utter confusion. The pink-haired princess watched with a hint of annoyance and suspicion, wondering what on earth was going on. Melanie covered her mouth with her book, sharing her thoughts in surprise, while her red-haired friend cast an inquisitive glance. Lusnia, with a thoughtful smile, thought to herself that she really should go and comfort His Highness. Melanie respectfully asked the princess if she had seen Lady Catherine. Rosie, annoyed, corrected her friend, explaining that the princess's name was Lucilia, not Sicilia, and Melanie apologized awkwardly. The red-haired girl and the blonde man were both startled, confused by a sudden shark scare. The pink-haired girl sneered, doubting how there could possibly be sharks in the Emperor's lake. The other girls answered in a fluster. The princess smiled and assured them that all the sharks had been caught, while her friends just stood there, confused and surprised. Rosie looked tired, wondering what this bizarre conversation was even about. She felt even more tired than usual, so she decided to relax with her book while the young lad lingered nearby. Norton watched her with curiosity, his gaze locked onto the open pages of the book, noticing it was written in some ancient language, and asked if anyone could actually read it. Norton carefully took the book, admitting he knew a little, and began to read. The blonde man was taken aback, asking about that form of manifestation, while the red-haired woman next to him looked worried. Zelda, lost in thought at her vanity, didn't even notice an expensive vase topple over and shatter on the floor. Her hand moved confidently across the paper, writing lines of mysterious symbols, the quill gliding in the silent room. The silver-haired man sneered, thinking that even the cold emperor was starting to fall in love with her. Zelda realized with a start that, in her distraction, she had accidentally poured some extremely expensive magic potion into the vase and was frustrated at its loss. She gave a slight, knowing smile and looked down, a hint of annoyance in her movement. The slender hand, clutching the bottle of expensive potion, trembled with loss and resentment. Zelda's face was filled with worry as she remembered she had one last bottle. She struggled to remain calm. The sound of heels clicking on the floor echoed, and the silent fear of being rejected for her scars hung heavy in the air. A man with a chilling smile approached with a bottle, asking a painful question about love and acceptance. The bottle slipped from her hand and crashed to the floor with a bang, and in the shards of glass, the girl saw her own confused face. The painful truth echoed in her mind. People only choose those they find attractive. A cold, gloved hand landed on her shoulder, and she felt a knot of tension in her stomach. Knew he wasn't here for small talk. The man leaned closer, a cold smile on his lips, and the girl felt flustered. Hearing him call her name in the darkness, a confession of longing echoed as a sharp object appeared in his hand, setting the stage for what was to come. The name Zelda von Trova appeared on the paper, leaving behind a trail of blood and a heavy, silent tension. Zelda clutched the letter, a fire of determination and anger burning within her, leaving no room for forgiveness. She made a firm decision not to tolerate this anymore and crumpled the envelope with trembling hands. The elegantly sealed envelope hid a secret message. The morning began with the memory of Prince Tesla's visit to her room. The prince had accused her of trying to steal the Empress's throne and left a stack of letters. The gift she received was just the beginning of a series of secret and dangerous events. Now, the prince was using the magic potion as leverage against her, and she held the letter with a cold, determined gaze. Perhaps he had expected a different reaction from the Emperor, but all she showed was concern and surprise. As a result, something crazy happened, and the maid was drawn into a whirlwind of dangerous events. There was only one jar of the magic potion left, and its effects would wear off in 2 weeks. Time was running out, and Zelda realized with horror that the distinguished guests would see her scars. She contacted the Grand Duke, asking him to help her get some magic potion. She was also digging up information on the guy who sent her the mysterious gift. The Empress swore to support the person she cared about no matter what. The Grand Duke was shocked by what he heard, feeling complete shock and confusion. The guy in a magnificent uniform was reading a letter contemplating an alliance that could turn the whole situation around. Everyone in the palace was on edge. If the Empress's scars were exposed, she would be completely finished. The tension between them was palpable, filled with anxiety and confusing signals. The guy sneered slightly, thinking it wasn't the end of the world if the Empress was left with a scar. But it was still a problem. It was too early to make a big move. Things were still brewing. Suddenly, a crazy accident broke the equilibrium, bringing a whole new level of danger. In the ornate hall, they were discussing the murder of a maid, the exposure of a spy, and the chaotic consequences for the Empress's court. In the garden, a knight named Ralph snapped his fingers upon receiving an order and prepared to act. A guy in full regalia was sending people to find a big shot and demanding that the magic potion be prepared as soon as possible. Ralph scratched his head, wondering why this mission had to be carried out at night instead of right now. The gloved guy kept writing, explaining that he had another, more urgent matter to attend to. A list of carriages that had arrived from Shatter appeared in the documents, which could be the key to cracking the whole thing. In a dark room filled with crates, a girl in a cloak hugged her knees, a red box beside her, thinking about some troubling matters. The guy in regalia sneered, a hint of confidence and something else on his lips. Against a background of magnificent flowers and blue light, a sealed envelope appeared. Because the sooner they got an answer, the better. Meanwhile, back at the Empress's palace, everything looked calm and stately. But beneath the calm, the situation was extremely tense. The pink-haired girl was storming down the ornate carpet, ready for a showdown. You could see the fury burning in her eyes. She couldn't believe these concubines would dare to challenge a princess. Zelda was taking all the blame for not being able to keep the concubines in line. She was supposed to clear the way like a substitute, but instead, she had become arrogant. Because the Emperor gave her a little attention, now the Emperor was also dragged into this farce. The princess was furious. She absolutely could not accept this situation. The maid was terrified because everything was in chaos. The girl was surprised to find His Majesty wasn't here, and now she was completely at a loss. The princess yelled, "I'm on good terms with Zelda," and barged in, ignoring the maid's surprise. She stopped before the ornate doors, ready to face whatever was behind them. Her gaze swept across the luxurious room, thinking with a twinge of jealousy that Zelda got to live like this. The princess sensed something was wrong and warily followed her intuition. A gorgeous dress caught her eye, and she was surprised that it belonged to Zelda. She wondered if the dress would suit Zelda and imagined herself wearing it. The pink-haired girl smiled, a spark flashing in her eyes. She turned amidst the roses and shadows, suddenly recognizing the familiar gown. A voice deep inside told her that this room, this dress, and even the position of Empress suited her better than Zelda. A flash of surprise and confusion crossed the girl's face as a white-gloved hand gently caressed the bed, as if searching for something important. Standing beside that man, the girl felt a wave of emotion. At the thought of Zelda having spent the night with the Emperor in that bed, Zelda's face turned as cold as ice. She called out Lucilia's name, her gaze locking onto her, filled with resolve and taut nerves. She snapped at her, reminding her that she was supposed to wait in the damn drawing room, not snoop around in here. The pink-haired girl, lounging on the bed, simply smirked as she watched the mistress of the house fly into a rage over her intrusion into the bedroom. Caught off guard, the blonde woman asked about the Emperor's sleeping habits, tried to fish for information. A white glove gently touched a stack of documents, and our girl remembered the real reason she was here. Lucilia leaned in and whispered, asking if the Emperor had a functional disorder, making the blonde woman squirm. The pink-haired girl giggled, murmuring that rumor has it he has a problem down there, which is why he avoids women. She demanded to know what happened last night, throwing the blonde woman into a complete panic. The blonde woman, struggling to maintain her composure, told her guest to get the hell out of her room immediately. Lucilia reluctantly agreed to leave, commenting that her big brother seemed to have taken a real liking to the master of this house. She admitted that she had thrown that stuff in the blonde woman's face on purpose, but her brother made the scar disappear as if it had never happened. The word "on purpose" echoed bitterly in her mind, unable to believe what she was hearing. Alone, she curled up on the bed, recalling how long she had suffered because of that scar. Lucilia, her face a frosty mask, announced she was hungry and turned to leave, ordering her men to keep an eye on the concubines. Suddenly, an ambush by the other girl left her caught off guard and terrified. Fury ignited in the blonde woman's eyes as she mentally cursed her rival for being so shameless. Zelda, her face like ice, suddenly grabbed the pink-haired girl's head, ignoring her struggles. Lucilia gritted her teeth and screamed in a mix of rage and fear, her eyes filled with desperation and fury. The heroine's inner monologue sounded like a confession of her own mad cruelty as the tension reached its peak. Zelda looked down, her gaze filled with determination and cold confidence. Lucilia struggled desperately to escape, her feet slipping on the floor, her voice trembling with fear. Zelda hesitated for a second, knowing she should back down, but she was in too deep to let go. A fire ignited in the blonde woman's eyes. She was done holding back. The princess recoiled in pain, glaring at her opponent, unable to believe she had so much strength. A black glove clutched a few strands of pink hair, a brutal reminder of who was in charge. The Empress looked down on the princess, her power and authority on full display. Fear and confusion flashed in the princess's eyes as she realized the situation. A drop of red liquid slid slowly down the glass as a thought echoed. Revenge is a dish best served cold. Seizing the moment, Lucilia smiled confidently, feeling that might makes right. Even with the suspicion that she was being played, she maintained her confidence. Zelda let out a cold smile, relishing the fact that her rival was actually helping her get revenge. Anger and shock flashed in the pink-haired girl's eyes. As the realization dawned on her, blinded by rage, she lunged at the blonde woman, accusing her of being cruel and vengeful. Zelda scoffed, warning that any attack on her would be met with swift judgment, and commented that her rival never learns. In the shadow of the heavy curtains, a black glove was raised menacingly. The promise that there will be no blame sounded like a death sentence. Lucilia, terrified and confused, saw a hand lunging toward her. Her eyes widened, completely caught off guard. As she fell, she whipped her head around, trying to figure out what had just happened and nervously anticipating the next move. Zelda calmly held her cup. As the tension reached a boiling point, she suddenly sensed a change in the air. The princess jumped up, accusing her rival of attacking her and threatening revenge. But the blonde woman didn't even bat an eye. Desperation and resentment were written all over Lucilia's face as she struggled to understand what she had done to deserve this. Zelda gave a cold smirk, feigning innocence, clearly enjoying every moment. The princess forced a nervous smile, realizing it would be difficult to prove her innocence. They were the only two in the room. The black glove gently set down the cup, but you could feel the threat in the gesture. The accusations would be silenced soon. The memory of the pink-haired girl trying on the Empress's gown was fuel for mockery, making her story sound like a load of nonsense. The girl clenched her fists, hearing they would strip her of her title and dress her like a servant, calling her a spoiled brat. Lucilia held back tears, her gaze a mixture of hurt and accusation. Her face burned with shame. She clenched her fists, promising herself she would get revenge for this humiliation. She wasn't going to let this go. The Empress, seated on her throne, coldly asserted that now they both had a score to settle. The black glove brushed against the pink hair, the message clear: get out now. Zelda leaned in close to her rival, warning her that revenge was coming, and it would be brutal. Suddenly, the whole atmosphere changed as the blonde woman smiled and turned to a newcomer, apologizing for the disturbance. The smiling maid said with relief that she had sent everyone else away when the princess showed up, so no one heard anything. The maid nonchalantly assured her that even if someone had heard, they would have been on her side, since everyone hates the princess. The maid thoughtfully offered to get some refreshing juice to help her cool down after that awful conversation. Zelda, now alone, wondered if Lucilia was really that stupid or if it was all an act, since it's actually quite clever to act so naive. In a brief exchange, the mistress and maid's eyes met, not entirely in agreement. Zelda waved it off with a faint smile, saying she was fine and expressing surprise that those words didn't come from Sharon. That was her usual maid. In the dim light, the blonde girl froze, realizing something strange was happening. She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to locate the source of that strange voice. A feeling washed over her, as if she had heard that voice before. The next day, an ornate carriage made its way toward the misty road bordering the Raffian Empire. As night fell, Under a star-studded sky, a massive castle emerged from the forest, and guests began to arrive. A man in a formal suit noted that they had arrived earlier than expected. A stone-faced man reported that the people from the Pasha and Delroy empires had arrived, and all host nations were expected to be present by the end of the day. A white-haired man, with a thoughtful smile, asked for more details about the Pasha Empire's arrival. In a dark flashback, we see the second prince, Kelvin Asselman, haunted by some extremely bad memories. Princess Jasper, though anxious, maintained her dignity as she prepared for the grand event she knew she had to attend. Carriage wheels rumbled over the cobblestones. They spoke of how the wedding and succession ceremony were still on hold after the tragic death of the Grand Princess. As the event kicked off, a pair of crimson eyes showed calm anticipation. Bathed in a crimson glow, a crown and a ring were soaked in a pool of blood. It was a brutal reminder that it wasn't just a throne that was taken, but lives. At sunset, behind closed doors, it was rumored that Emperor Linell had taken an empress from a prominent family. In Chatinal, surrounded by golden flowers, the silver-haired man let out a cold smile, thinking, well, I didn't see that coming. As the Intercontinental Tournament approached, a flag was unfurled on a map, hinting at big things to come. Empress Catherine Edens of the Delroy Empire arrived amidst lavish roses and jewels, exuding confidence and sheer power. Second Prince Kelvin Asselman and Princess Jasper from the Pasha Empire rested among white lilies, the picture of elegance and class. Representatives from all these nations were pouring into the Raffian Empire, greeted by dazzling lights and an extremely formal atmosphere. Emperor Adrian Melton of the Tabello Empire wore a sly smile, his silver hair and red eyes standing out against the white flowers. On the steps of the Grand Palace, a man in a dark cloak and a woman in a pink dress prepared to greet the guests for the grand event. Against the backdrop of the magnificent palace, everyone was buzzing about the arrival of Emperor Adrian of Tabello, and the tension between these rulers was thick enough to cut with a knife. Empress Katria, completely fed up with the formalities, decided to skip greeting the guests and head straight back to the palace. To him, this was just so low. What a sneaky bastard. What annoys me most is that look on his face, like he knows everything and is playing God. You know, you can tell a lot about a person just by watching them. The fancy ride is here. The thought of him being able to read my mind just makes me even more furious. Wait, I thought he was a pacifist. Looks like I misjudged him. That show-off is as fake as his peacemaker act. Seriously, I feel you. We're in the same boat. You can't truly understand peace without love. Zelda, we're starting. And just like that, the man with long, silver hair was gliding straight through the hall as if floating on magic. Zelda and Linell, all dressed up, were laughing about some clown who wasted magic on stupid things. And now the kid understood what they meant. On the marble floor, a man in black boots and a girl in a pink dress met. You could feel the atmosphere of a long-awaited reunion. The blonde man, his face expressionless, raised a hand to his chest as if trying to stay calm, showing immense willpower. The silver-haired man smirked amidst a bush of blue roses, admitting that the curse was still there. The blue-eyed kid thanked them for taking care of him, saying that Emperor Adrian hadn't changed a bit. The man with silver hair and red eyes gave a mysterious half-smile, hiding his true thoughts. He smiled slightly at the girl, feigning surprise that he was face-to-face with the Empress of Raffion herself. He elegantly kissed her hand in greeting, saying it was a pleasure to finally meet her. Someone was thinking about what the girl would look like in the Empress's gown, noting how elegant and slender she was. Zelda clutched her chest, worried. Was this an illusion? She heard that strange voice again. With the silver-haired man's hand on his chest, she suddenly realized she was hearing Emperor Adrian's thoughts. Zelda stared at him, surprised and nervous, while the voice in her head smugly assumed she was smitten with him. The voice in her head noted that if she weren't the Empress of Raffion, she would have been taken to Voni Palace. Zelda narrowed her eyes in suspicion. The silver-haired man smiled calmly, appearing before a background of lilacs, wondering what on earth was going on. Zelda bowed her head slightly, flustered but polite, showing the proper etiquette upon meeting him. The man in the ornate robe welcomed the guest's arrival, inviting him inside to rest from his long journey. The guest requested a moment, his voice sounding a bit sad, reminding him about the guest's regular tea ceremony. The silver-haired man let out a cold smile. commenting on how cold Linell's personality was. Zelda's face was tense as she wondered if the Empress was generous enough to make time for a guest who had come so far. She lowered her gaze, deciding to find out what kind of person Emperor Adrian really was by inviting him to take a seat. In a lavish hall, the Emperor, Empress, and their guests sat around a round table, talking. Emperor Adrian greeted his companions, ready to start the conversation in this formal setting. Zelda, surprised and a little anxious, asked if he was wearing a temperature-regulating magic stone. The silver-haired man replied with a slight smile that he wasn't wearing one and wondered why she asked. The girl, flustered and wary, admitted that she felt an unusually intense heat coming from him. Unlike anyone else, Linell, in his ornate robe, smiled and suggested it was because of the Empress's passionate love, making the girl blush. The silver-haired guest agreed, commenting that her curse seemed to have weakened as well. The girl in the pink dress felt the change in her body with surprise and excitement, her heart racing. The red-eyed man suddenly felt a strange sense of unease. His gaze became wary. The silver-haired emperor detected some strange fluctuations in Linell's aura, which worried him. Zelda pondered with a head full of suspicion. Is it really possible to read someone's aura? Her companion felt that this guy had more secrets than anyone realized. Emperor Adrian tried to stay calm and dodged the question, hoping he hadn't given himself away. A maid walked in with a tray, finally bringing the long-awaited drinks. A special cocoa drink, a famous specialty of the Tabello Empire, appeared on the table, topped with cute marshmallows. The emperor smiled and told everyone to drink the cocoa while it was hot, teasing the cold emperor of Raphael. The emperor and empress, all smiles, carefree, exchanged cups and smiled at each other. The girl's inner monologue was on the verge of a breakdown, hoping someone had put something nasty in the emperor's cup. She thought about how the poison would slowly lower his body temperature, leading to a tragic death by freezing. Zelda, now with a worried look on her face, watched to see how things would unfold.